Let's begin with Governor Walz's action during the Black Lives Matter riots of 2020, which, of course, were the biggest news during his term as the Minnesota governor. So first of all, he acknowledged his, quote, abject failure of his response to the violent protests that happened in Minneapolis that basically burned down the city. You may remember this footage from Minneapolis streets under the gentle reign of Governor Tim Walz. Looks like a war zone. And of course, it would look like a war zone because Tim Walz, among other Democratic politicians in the state of Minnesota, decided that it was absolutely necessary to allow rioters to burn down streets, to loot stores, to tear apart the city, to shoot people in the name of racial justice, to take over police stations. That was Governor Tim Walz who presided over all of this. Walz said, quote, Minneapolis and St. Paul are on fire. The fire is still smoldering on our streets. The ashes are symbolic of decades and generations of pain, of anguish unheard. Oh, wow, poetic language about people burning down, you know, the biggest city in his state. Well done, Tim Walz. Here, in fact, was Tim Walz talking about the George Floyd riot, saying this has been brewing for 400 years, which is why people are burning down entire cities in his state, and he wasn't calling out the National Guard.
These are things that have been brewing in this country for 400 years.
And then, reluctantly, he said, we can't have like the looting and the recklessness, but he didn't send the National Guard until too late, until the city had basically been taken over and destroyed.
We cannot have the looting and the recklessness that went on. We cannot have it because we can't function as a society, and I refuse to have it take away the attention of the stain that we need to be working on.
Absolutely ridiculous. So while Kamala Harris was bailing out the rioters, she's now the presidential candidate. Her vice presidential candidate was presiding over the burning down of the city and claiming that the real problem with the burning down of the city, it was like a Norm Macdonald joke. The real problem isn't the burning down of the city and the hurting of people and the destruction of businesses and the full-scale criminality. The real problem, of course, is that it undermined the cause, according to Tim Walz. He says, now generations of pain is manifesting itself in front of the world, and the world is watching. He cited a call he received from a state senator who described her district, quote, on fire. No police, no firefighters, no social control. Constituents locked in houses wondering what they were going to do. That is an abject failure that cannot happen. Abject failure would make a great ad against Tim Walz and against Kamala Harris. And just amazing job here by Kamala Harris in picking the person who presided over the rioters she attempted to bail out of prison. Really, really solid stuff there from Tim Walz. But don't worry, his radicalism wasn't just restricted to the BLM riots. So he had this lengthy wish list that got passed in 2023. And Walz said, our wish list is a to-do list, and we're checking it off. So what exactly is in that to-do list? According to the Minneapolis Post, with the help of a $17.5 billion surplus, that would have been $19 billion had the DFL, which is the Democratic Farmer Labor Party, not changed the way inflation was included mid-session, the 2023-2025 budget will be 40% higher than the current budget. So this dude loves his spending. He increased the budget by 40%. Democrats then codified abortion rights, paid family and medical leave, transgender rights protections, which we'll get to in a moment, driver's licenses for illegal immigrants. So this new administration, this Kamala Harris-Walz administration, they're going to be tough on the border. So tough that the new VP candidate wants driver's licenses for illegal immigrants in the state of Minnesota. Restoration of voting rights for felons. Oh, isn't that nice? Wider voting access. A $1 billion investment in affordable housing, including for rental assistance. So you could not find a person who is more radical than Tim Walz. Also adopted under Tim Walz's governorship, background checks for private gun transfer, which of course means effectively a gun registry. DFL lawmakers also banned supposed conversion therapy for LGBTQ people, which is much more controversial than it sounds like. When they're talking about conversion therapy, they're no longer talking about the horrible old practice of taking teenagers who were gay and electroding them or something. They're talking about, actual therapy for people struggling with their sexual identity, for example. He legalized recreational marijuana. He required a carbon-free electric grid by 2040. Again, that is such insanity. That is not going to happen. That is not going to happen because the alternative sources of electricity, like wind and solar, are simply not up to the task of supplying electricity to an entire state on the base in the middle of some of the coldest areas of the United States. Adopted a new reading curriculum based on phonics, and passed a massive $2.58 billion capital construction package. So that is tax hikes, that is spending, that is Tim Walz in a nutshell. And of course it is Tim Walz in a nutshell. Remember, Tim Walz is effectively a socialist. And he literally said it. This is 1 week ago. He was saying that one person's socialism is another person's neighborliness, which comes as a shock to everybody who used to live in Cuba, where socialism was another word for your neighbor comes and shoots you in the face.
For one thing, don't ever shy away from our progressive values. One person's socialism is another person's neighborliness.
I mean, this is insane. The fact that you picked him and not Josh Shapiro is such a gift to Trump. It's such a gift. Just run ads with Harris, Walz, all day long. All day long. That's all. Just their record. They're the most radical ticket in American history by far. They make Barack Obama look like a moderate. That's how radical this ticket is. They are insanely radical. So she didn't pick a swing state guy. She didn't pick somebody who is moderate. She picked somebody from a non-swing state who is not moderate and also is not particularly charismatic. But we all know the one thing that he was that we really, really needed was Gentile. That was like the biggest thing. Couldn't be a Jew. That was the biggest thing because the pro-Hamas base won't riot, presumably in Chicago. If she had picked a Jew, they might have. But now that it's Tim Walz, a white guy from Minnesota who's not Jewish and who presumably supported the JCPOA, the Iran deal under Barack Obama, well, that means that the rioters won't show up because they are the captain now. The radical left is the captain now. If the Trump campaign does not take advantage, that is political malpractice all of its own. There's a brand new opportunity to reshift the narrative for the Republicans, and there's a moral and political obligation for the Trump campaign to do just that. We'll get to more of Tim Walz in just 1 second. There's only one cell phone company that gives you free premium access to the media you actually care about. That is Pure Talk. This might be the best offer Pure Talk has ever come out with. Listen to this. When you switch your cell phone service to Pure Talk on a qualifying plan, you get a free 1-year insider subscription to Daily Wire Plus. That is correct. Take advantage of unlimited talk, unlimited text, 15 gigs of data, and mobile hotspot on America's most dependable 5G network for just $35 a month. And you get 1 year free of Daily Wire Plus. The Daily Wire Plus insider plan gets you access to our entire library of movies, series, documentaries, including Lady Ballers, What is a Woman, Mr. Bertram Run, Hide, Fight, and more. Plus, you get our daily shows uncensored, ad-free. The only way you can get all of that is by going to puretalk.com/Shapiro. I've been telling you to stop overpaying for your cell phone plan for a very long time. If you haven't made the switch on over to Pure Talk yet, now would be the best time. I myself have been using Pure Talk for years. My coverage is excellent. You can have that excellent coverage. Plus, 1 year free of Daily Wire Plus Insider with a qualifying plan. Go to puretalk.com/Shapiro today. Switch to that qualifying plan. Get 1 year free of Daily Wire Plus Insider. That's puretalk.com/Shapiro today. Back to the radical that Kamala Harris just idiotically picked for her vice president. Again, I'm feeling a little pep in my step this morning, given the fact that she didn't just betray that she's a radical. She betrayed that she's an incompetent. She's an incompetent. This is a move of political malpractice by Kamala Harris, and I couldn't be more here for it. I'm pretty here for it. Here is Tim Walz defending the Afghanistan withdrawal in July 2024. Good luck with this particular point of order, given the fact that it was precisely the Afghanistan withdrawal that sank Joe Biden's political hopes all the way back in 2021.
Exiting a conflict is never going to be good. That situation was horrific. There were Minnesotans on the ground that were providing aid to that. I think the biggest thing is an understanding that the way that was prosecuted, the way that we tried to build stability, was simply going to be incredibly difficult. So, I served with Senator Cotton. I also know that a lot of his positions have been overly aggressive in terms of how the United States prosecutes a peaceful resolution. So, look, the Afghan withdrawal was tragic, but it was a long-standing situation that rolled over many, many months and over both terms of presidents.
Absolutely amazing stuff. Great job, Tim Walz. Please keep defending the Afghanistan withdrawal. Let's see how that goes for you. Meanwhile, it was Walz who was just back in August talking about how Joe Biden was a highly effective president. Part of that Democratic cover-up of the fact that the president of the United States has been mentally gone for years at this point.
First of all, he's been one of the most highly effective presidents we've ever seen. I sat in Congress for 12 years waiting for Infrastructure Week. He actually delivered on this. And look, Dean is a friend of mine. I love him. But I spent last weekend on Mackinac Island with Tony Evers and Gretchen Whitmer talking about how we're going to make sure that we win this for Joe Biden. Because this is not a debate about Joe Biden's age or experience. It's about a debate about protecting the democracy.
Amazing stuff there. Amazing stuff there from Tim Walz. He's a highly effective president. Highly effective. Tim Walz, again, is on pretty much every radical bandwagon, up to and including abolishing the Electoral College, which he says is undemocratic. Again, could she have picked anybody who more resembles Bernie Sanders than Tim Walz? Hard to think of one.
I do believe the Constitution is a living document. I think Jefferson's quote about
as mankind progressed and as technology progressed, the document was to progress with it as how you deal with these things. But I do think you have to be very careful about some of those core principles. It always seems to me, going back to the Senate and the filibuster, the Electoral College seems very undemocratic to me. I mean, I think at first blush.
Simping, man, they are simping for the radicals. They are simping for them. And then, of course, one of his signal accomplishments in the state of Minnesota is that he signed into law an order protecting access to, quote, gender-affirming care for youth, which we all know what that means at this point. And then he called conservative states bullies for banning transgender surgeries and hormone treatments for minors. He also suggested that Minnesota agencies should not try to assist other states who are trying to penalize people receiving gender-affirming care. Again, gender-affirming care is a euphemism. He also suggested that the state, schools, for example, should not notify parents if their children show up to school and claim they are of another gender. That is who Tim Walz is. Here is Tim Walz signing this into law alongside Hildy Edwards, a 12-year-old who advocates for the rights of trans children with her parents, Hannah and Dave. Here is Tim Walz.
We know this urgency is real, thus the need of an executive order today. Now, I want to be clear. I can't pretend to understand what goes through people's minds. I cannot imagine the stress that families and individuals go through. But here in Minnesota, we're going to be a place of refuge to make sure that they feel safe and welcome. And I don't know what a group of people in Pierre who decide to make life miserable and more dangerous for people are thinking, but it's not going to happen in Minnesota.
Amazing stuff there from Tim Walz on every single issue. He is wide open to moderate Americans. Wide open. By the way, dude also has a bunch of scandals under his name. It's pretty much the worst pick of all. I'm elated. It's the worst pick she could have made. Of all the people, worse than Whitmer, who at least is a popular governor of a swing state, certainly worse than Shapiro. Worse than Mark Kelly, who's a fairly popular senator from a swing state. Like, what's the upside here? Presumably the upside is trying to get a bunch of upper-class suburban liberals in Philadelphia or in Wisconsin to think that this is a dude with blue-collar appeal. Are you tired of the lies and the twist of the mainstream media talking points? Yeah, me too. Join me in my newest series, Fact, where I dismantle and bring truth to this tiring mainstream agenda.